Do you have problems falling asleep at night? You're not alone. There's about 1 in 5 Americans that reported problems falling asleep in 2020. So it's essential to find approaches to assist with our ability to dial down into rest and to enter into deep slumber. Now, this is especially true considering that the hypnotics that are offered as medication are only meant to be short term and they can have some serious side effects. Now, the cool thing is, I'm going to discuss with you today a hormone called melatonin, which is our body's natural way to help us balance and counter the effects that I've been talking about in previous videos related to the stress hormone cortisol. Now, of course, we do need cortisol for optimal functioning. We need all our hormones, but we need them in balance. And melatonin is like the sidekick to cortisol. Whereas cortisol keeps us awake and helps us stay alert, melatonin helps us slip into slumberland and calm down and relax and rejuvenate. So, what I want to discuss with you in this post is a little bit about this relationship with melatonin, the hormone, and cortisol. I want to talk to you about what melatonin is, what it does, what influences it, clinical studies on the benefits of actually supplementing with melatonin, how it works, what occurs with melatonin and cortisol when they're dysregulated, and then some functional medicine tests that physicians might use to assess this melatonin cortisol relationship, or just melatonin and cortisol in general, and then how to balance it naturally using naturopathic and functional medicine strategies. Finally, I'll just go over some brief facts about melatonin if you're going to use it as a supplement, and especially stick around because there are some safety things just to be aware of. Because remember, melatonin, after all, is a hormone. Okay, that being said, let's get started. I alluded a little bit about the connection between cortisol and melatonin in the beginning. And what this means is that there's a yin and the yang in the balance of the sleep-wake cycle, or what we call our circadian rhythm, or our chronobiology. And whereas cortisol has the schedule of the early morning riser, where it goes higher to keep us alert, around 8 a.m. or so for most people, if their schedule is around what the norm is, which is waking up around 6 or 7 or 8, going to bed relatively between 10 and 12. It does decrease slightly in the evening and in the early sleep phase, but remember, it's also going to rise a little bit later to wake us up. Melatonin is the opposite end of the spectrum. So it's released after sunset and it peaks between 2 and 4 a.m. and then it decreases into the day with light exposure. So again, we have this balancing effect, okay? So that being said, keep that in mind as I talk about melatonin, because we are on this hormonal series kick here, and you'll see where it fits in as I continue to discuss melatonin. Now, if you missed any of the previous videos or want to dive in more detail, be sure to check out the links to especially this article, because it'll have all those links embedded to everything I discuss, as well as the references and the resources. So if you are a fellow biochemistry geek like me and love this stuff, you can actually dive directly into the scientific reviews, or you can just get an overview again in reading the article itself. All right, so melatonin is actually classified as both a hormone and an antioxidant, and it belongs to the same family of neurotransmitters as serotonin, which is the endoalanine family. They're both synthesized from the amino acid tryptophan. So tryptophan can either produce melatonin later on down the line from serotonin. It can also produce niacin. Now, human, plants, and microbes all can make their own melatonin, and it can also be ingested in various dietary sources. And most people think of, if they know about melatonin, that it's produced in the pineal gland, which is part of the endocrine system and is located in the brain, but it's also produced in other places throughout the body. And this is in our bone marrow cells, in our white blood cells, in our mast cells, which are another form of an immune cell related to histamine, in our skin cells. And kind of cool is that our gut, again, like it's kind of everything goes back to the gut, right? It's home to the immune system. We have our gut brain. Now we have our gut melatonin, which actually our gut produces 400 times more melatonin than our pineal gland. So that's pretty cool. Melatonin is also present in most fluids in the body, and it has receptors throughout the whole body and the brain and the spleen and the adrenal glands and the kidneys, fat cells, heart cells, you name it, reproductive organs. So this shows that melatonin's effects are probably far-reaching, more so than we're even aware of today, and that this circadian pattern of sleep-wake is probably more important than many people realize. And actually, I think we are just starting to really hammer in on the fact of how important sleep really is for overall lifestyle and overall health and wellness, and just mental health as well in general. So that being said, what does melatonin do in the body? So we've seen this relationship with cortisol. We know it's a hormone. We know where it's located. What does it do? So it has many vital functions, and these include obviously our sleep-wake cycle, because that's what I've been stressing. It acts as an antioxidant, so it protects our cells and tissues from damage from environmental exposure, also from just our body going through its natural cleanup processes. Mitochondrial homeostasis. So our mitochondria are like the powerhouse, the energy centers of our cells. It helps with gene regulations in reproduction. So this is where the hormonal aspect comes in as well. Modulation of inflammation and the immune response. It is related to gut and digestive health. There have been studies where it's supportive for that. Regulating body temperature and body mass, bone health, and then neurodevelopment. So melatonin does a lot more than the sleep-wake kind of control mechanism feedback. There's been some very interesting clinical studies with melatonin. I'm going to go through some of the highlights here. This in no way is all exclusive, but just so you have an idea. And of course, my focus is mostly on mental health, mood, digestion, and hormones. So in this series, I kind of highlighted the mood and hormonal aspect here. Overall, there's been various clinical studies with the benefits of melatonin for healthy blood pressure regulation for women with polycystic ovarian syndrome, certain cancers, jet lag, and sleep disorders. So there's kind of more studies in that aspect. Now, in 2015 and 2020, Cochrane reviews, which are one of the superior reviews done where they take all the reviews and all the studies and combine them and find if there was an overall effect for a specific intervention. They found melatonin to be effective for relieving anxiety, even when compared to benzodiazepine. And other studies also suggest that melatonin alterations are linked to other mental disorders. Now, one paper actually kind of explains this mechanism, and it's through the stress-induced, so there's that word again, stress-induced diversion of tryptophan, which remember is a precursor to melatonin, into this inflammatory metabolite called kynurenine. Now, this is actually a metabolite that is associated with depression. If you think about it, because what's happening is this tryptophan is going rather into serotonin, into melatonin, and niacin, which are all nourishing for our system and our mind. It's going into this other pathway. Now, this could explain the link between melatonin and mood in those clinical trials I just discussed, as well as the link between melatonin and its impact on brain. So another study I actually found that was interesting is shown that melatonin could actually help regulate our memory formation, our neural signaling, and synaptic plasticity in the hippocampus, which is our memory center, and other regions of the brain that stress disrupts. So in other words, it's helping our body adapt and function, our brain adapt and function better under stress. and help us build kind of resilience. That was the findings of that studies. Now, additionally, one older study evaluated the effects of melatonin on sleep and mood disorders in older adults, and it found that melatonin worked better than placebo, which was a sugar pill, and it improved sleep and decreasing symptoms of depression and anxiety. Now, I personally have used melatonin for women that are pre and postmenopausal in my practice for hot flashes, as well as sleep disorders related to going through hormonal shifts. And this is because of some of the studies I found on this, melatonin's role in brain support and this cortisol relationship, right? So I know that if I can modulate cortisol in the stress response, sometimes we don't have to go, into more of the more intrusive hormonal interventions, right? So melatonin is something that we've used at physiological doses, which I'll go into a little bit later. So what influences melatonin? There are various factors: age, we make less as we age; health status, nutrition, light, computers, LED blue light that's reflecting off of those, medications, and then lifestyle, especially if someone's working shift work, that's going to dysregulate their sleep-wake cycle. How does melatonin work? So melatonin is stimulated by darkness. So light suppresses melatonin from the pineal gland. Now, interestingly, sunlight actually produces melatonin in the skin. So that is an interesting kind of duality that we have. So similar to the sunshine vitamin of vitamin D, there's melatonin as well that we produce. This is probably because of its antioxidant production. What happens when melatonin and cortisol are dysregulated? So again, we're going to have this imbalance in these two systems. Likely cortisol is going to be high, melatonin is going to be lower. This can disrupt our ability to fall asleep, to rejuvenate. We could get daytime sleepiness, problems with brain processing, because remember, during sleep, our brain cleans out at night and all those memories are consolidated, and there's just amazing stuff going on when we sleep that we're still researching. People will report feeling decreased alertness and problems with memory and decision making. Also, we're going to lose those hormonal benefits as well as physical benefits of sleep. And also low levels of melatonin results in suboptimal antioxidant support, immune modulation, and gut healing properties. So this is another reason why stress can cause systemic inflammation and lowered immunity. We have this impact on sleep and then resulting impact on melatonin, and then this hormonal cascade and the lack of the ability to rejuvenate. So we've gone through a lot. How do we measure how much melatonin we need? There are different tests you can do. Cortisol awakening response, the CAR panel, as well as a rhythm panel and a melatonin profile panel. And more info on those tests are on the actual article. And that would be through a physician to get that information. That being said, there are ways to balance melatonin naturally without actual supplementation. And this is with a naturopathic and functional doctor, keeping in mind that genetics, inflammation, toxic exposures, lifestyle factors, such as is someone going to sleep during hours that are going to be most restorative for them? How is their physical activity? How are they dialing in stress? Are they nourishing their bodies and brains? These are all things that are going to be considered. So for example, in the diet, there's certain foods such as animal foods, plant foods, vegetables, nuts, seeds, oils and spices, and tart cherries specifically have the highest amount of melatonin. There's also tryptophan-rich foods, right, which can be consumed because of their conversion into melatonin. But if you have a genetic variation in that pathway, it could lead to less melatonin. And diet isn't the greatest way to get amounts of melatonin if you are really low, because you have to consume kind of an excessive amount to get physiological dosage. That being said, it could be a good supplemental aspect to do if you're trying to help your body maintain balance with melatonin. B12 has actually been shown in a few human clinical trials to actually help impact melatonin and lead to better sleep. Blue light blocking glasses, those have actually been shown in several studies to help prevent the melatonin suppressing effects of if we're up late at night and using, the computer, and light is getting into our retina, which is stimulating the blockage of melatonin. So one of the best ways to help melatonin is to have a natural circadian rhythm. And part of that is if we're going to be up and about with all this light, to allow our bodies to still see with these blue light blocking glasses, but also to not have the downstream effects of blocking melatonin. That being said, we also have to make sure we get sunlight when we wake up, because that also stimulates the cortisol and helps this balance. We also want to consider modulating cortisol, right? Because lifestyle practice, decreasing stress, nutrition, aromatherapy, herbs and supplements, those were reviewed in my last video, but those are all going to balance cortisol naturally, which is going to have this indirect impact on melatonin. So as you can see, melatonin does a lot more than sleep and wake, and it can be used as an intervention responsibly to help with things such as mood, to help with sleep disorder, to help maybe with some hormonal issues. Let's discuss a little bit, if we're going to talk about supplemental melatonin, some of the key things to keep in mind. So there's no standard dose for melatonin if we're talking about how much someone should take of melatonin. Research does use approximately 0.3 milligrams, which is the physiological doses, to 5 milligrams daily. And usually you don't want to go over 1, maybe maximum 3 if you're trying to relate to sleep and stay within kind of this safe range for studies. That being said, they have used high doses as interventions for trials, and it's been pretty well, there have been no red flags for safety. So just keep that in mind. But for sleep, again, it's the lowest dose possible, close to that 0.3 milligrams. For nervous system balance, they've used things up to 300 milligrams for neurodegenerative conditions. Now you're using melatonin almost in a drug-like fashion as a hormone. So again, that should be monitored. Melatonin actually, and this is probably why it's so safe, is because between 4 to 8 hours, it's out of your system. This is after 1 to 5 milligrams usage. So overdosage is unlikely if you're using between that 1 to 5 milligrams. Now, if you're taking too much, there are some common side effects such as headaches, dizziness, nausea, and feeling drowsy. Of course, anything more extreme you want to be careful of. And then as far as safety, it could potentially interact with medication, so be aware of that. It's a hormone, so don't just take this willy-nilly. Remember that it's going to have this natural effect on other hormones as well. Some evidence shows that it could influence growth hormone, which is this controversy of should it be used in children. That being said, the trials actually show benefit, especially for people of the autism spectrum using melatonin, and there have no been safety flags. There was a recent media attention with children using melatonin, but that was related to this overdosage. They were taking in excessive amounts. They got a hold of the melatonin and kind of went crazy. So that I wouldn't recommend. But again, in general, it's non-addictive. It's really safe, and there haven't really been much reports about problems with melatonin, as you will see in other hormones. So that is good news as well. I hope that you found this beneficial and that it helped guide you in seeing the importance of melatonin, this relationship between our stress response, our ability to stay alert and productive, as well as the importance of recuperation and rest and rejuvenation in getting this hormone associated with darkness and all of the benefits that it entails. I also hope that if you're going to decide to supplement with melatonin or use natural approaches, you now have some tools that you can use that will guide you in that to make some safe decisions. And of course, always check with your doctor when you're going to use any hormone and when you're going to make any changes in your protocol, so that they monitor it. And more importantly, so you're empowered and actually know what is and isn't working. You can track it. Thank you very much. Be sure to check out my other videos on my YouTube channel, as well as on my blog at breakfreemedicine.com. You can also be sure to check out my free resources that are available in the resource section of my essential oils website. And I also offer courses for physicians as well as paid courses for consumers on how to incorporate some of these mind-body practices to have a healthier, happier, more vibrant life that is in alignment with what you want for living out your passion. And so that you don't have to worry about staying kind of trodden down with some of these health concerns. All right, with that, I will wish you the best, and I hope to see you again on my next video. Take good care.